Good morning, Ljubljana. Here is Rini Romme from the Netherlands. I'm going to tell you a story about competence-based education, the experiences we have in the Netherlands. It's a story about what we did, how we did it, and the difference between what to do and how to do it. Start something about myself. Currently, I'm a strategic policy advisor at a school in the agriculture sector in the Netherlands. It's called Yuverta. It's one of the biggest schools in agriculture education. My expertise about competence-based education started in 2005. Then I was involved in a national organization, the implementation of competence-based qualification structure and education. It was in the period 2005 till 2012, and it implemented school by school, education by education, not all at once, but we took a few years for it. The last years I worked at the MBO Raad. It's an independent foundation representing all public vet schools in the Netherlands, also for implementation of a new qualification structure. That was in the years 2012 and 2018. After that, I started at Yuverta. As I said, I'm going to take you through the story of implementing new education and the importance of distinguishing what and how. Start about something about vet in the Netherlands, the numbers. In the Netherlands, we have about 470,000 vet students. They're in the age of 16 till 23, sometimes older, and it's about 40% of the students in higher education. So 60% of the students are also in schools for applied science or universities. 40% is vet. We're talking about 52 public funded vet colleges with 34,000 teachers and trainers, and also 16,000 students, staff. And together, we do it with 250,000 work placement companies. We arrange vocational education in the preparatory vocational education and general secondary education on the levels EQF 1 to 4, on 2 learning pathways, vocational pathway and vocational guided pathway. Both are full-time education. That means 1,600 study load hours per year. On vocational pathway, the school is about every day and 35% apprenticeship. And the vocational guided pathway, then people go to work and they come to school about 1 day a week. At the end, both pathways gain the same diploma, and about 65%, 75% of the students is in the vocational pathway, 25% in the guided pathway. Our story starts in 1995. Then there was a law on vocational education and adult training. Well, all forms of private and public training in industry and commerce for middle management and skilled workers came together. It was vocational qualification training programs for a profession. And that means for vet in the Netherlands, not only the exercise of profession, but also learn to learn and also good citizenship. We call it the triple obligation to qualify. So students not only are there for the profession, not only for the industry, but also they have learned to learn that what they can do now is just a part of what they have to do in the future. So they have to learn themselves to go on and on and on. And it's also important that there's some social functioning where they have a contribution to, and we call it good citizenship. After a few years, we got 1999. 1999, of course, the year of the Millennium Bug, of course, the year of Prince, but I'm talking about the Advisory Committee for Education and Labor Markets. The Advisory Committee advocates requirements documents with occupational profiles for the development of qualification files. It said we need a description of core activities, core tasks, and core competences. It was the first time the word competences was introduced in the Netherlands. Competences were to describe the ability of an individual to act adequately in the process-oriented and product-oriented manner and work and professional situations, but also competences in learning or training situations and in social situations. So it's an economic and a social integrative perspective. It's an update to vet students in their apprenticeship or work, help realize new approaches. There's a civil effect for good citizens, and at the end, they are good workers. So the qualifications we make together, or the qualification structure, is a social construct. It's a construct made by social partners. When I say social partners, I mean industry, I mean the unions, but also representatives of educational institutions. These sectoral organized bodies are the antennas in the industry. They know what's necessary. They know significance in the context of vocational practice. They are the intermediates between core developments on the labor market and vocational education. There were about 17 sectoral organized bodies, for example, in techniques, for example, in agriculture, for example, in logistics, for example, in hospitality, and on and on and on. The government isn't a guardian of the public interest. It determines a number of criteria that the qualification structure must contain. To mention the triple obligation, but also languages, math, that kind of things. In a national standard format was introduced, where every sectoral organized body has to fit in his own qualification in a standard review framework. We're talking about what is necessary of the qualification structure. What is necessary at the end of the road? What people can do, what they're capable of, what's their diploma worth in the industry. Talk to you about why. That was the commission. I talked to you about the what, the results, the industry, the qualification. But there's also a how. The how is the school, they say how to do the education programs. In 2005 it started. It's called competence-based education. 1999 was advisory. Then the social partners made their qualifications. And in 2005, the first school started with the qualifications. The educational institutions are free to determine how they wish to design it, their own educational structure and their course. The qualification structure is mainly a communication tool. It's a competence-based approach, has an impact on the entire curriculum. So what's in the qualification structure can be different from the training structure. The organization and design of courses is in principle independent of the structure. It's owned by the schools. It's how the schools introduce, how they help the students, how they get on with the teachers. In this way, knowledge and skills can first be applied separately and then be integrated in the course. That was when people were used to it, and then they went on with it. First knowledge, first theory, first practice, and then integrated in competence-based work. Now I'm talking about the how. How did we introduce the competence-based qualifications? It meant a lot. It meant a change in context. Competence-based was different from the old qualification structure. It meant a lot for students, for teachers. It means learning in context and the profession and learning outside the context of the profession. It means working with critical professional situations. It means training on the job, learning and practice. Totally different than what we were used to, doing theoretical at school and an exam at the end of it. But also very individual learning programs. It was more important for students to build a portfolio than they do the exam at the end of the course and get a diploma. No more developing, but designing performance and critical situations. It also means inter-subject assessments, not only exams at the end of the course. It needs teamwork instead of every man for himself. For example, a core team, there's 80% of the expertise needed, and always there is supplemented by specialists. A beautiful example was a book written for it. An example was buy a car at a scrapyard. The school assignment was buy a car, fix it up, get it inspected, and sell it on the internet. From the profit, you and your team can go karting on one evening. The rest can go to charity. There was an example. It also means that you start with a project. You start with something in practice, and then you look what's necessary to get your skills, to get your competences, whether we need it to finish the job. But was the success or a failure? Teachers and students and they complained. There were doubts about this activeness. The focus was too much on developing skills and neglect building a solid knowledge base. Calls for a return to traditional education came up. There were no examination programs or fixed curricula. Students complained about lack of structure, and they had to be responsible for their own portfolio and assessment. They weren't used to it. Teachers and students didn't have the skills and attitudes they were needed for competence-based education. Knowledge is no longer sacred and needed in advance. Consulted or asked were needed. That requires coaching and guidance instead of knowledge transfer. There was a difference for teachers in the way how they should act. The content and methodology changes. The teachers had to design again, and that takes a lot of time and had a lot of impact on the way they could work. The classroom went open, and that makes you vulnerable. So in 2012, after a few years of expiring, there were some recommendations for the next generation of qualifications. The politicians intervened, and the recommendation for a new design was the qualification requirements of a course must match the needs of the industry as closely as possible, so that the vet graduate has the greatest possibility chance of finding a suitable job. Then, files must be transparent, as thin as possible, and clear as a result of the description of the qualification requirements. So not as much as possible, but as thin as possible. Not what's needed, what the knowledge, what the things you have to do, but just at the end, what are your competences you can start working with. The 70 social partners, the social companies went together in one organization for the sectoral organized bodies and the Organization for Cooperation in Vocational Education and Training in the labor market. So in that organization, there are the industries, there are the schools who are represented, and there are the social partners. And knowledge and skills are important of behavior, and the results must be clearly indicated. So a next generation qualification structure started. Again, it took a few years, so it started in 2016. In that time, 2012, when it started with the advice till now, the new qualifications in vets said the competencies required to successfully carry out the work process have been identified for the starting professional. So it makes it more clear what they have to do when they start at the job. Specific information of level, typology, and legal professional requirements are mentioned. The qualification files are described in learning outcomes. It was a new word in that time. Easy and quick update had to be possible, so that the education can respond better to development in the regional labor market. So it's not a qualification forever, but it's a qualification for max 4 or 5 years, and then we have to change it again. It also contains the general requirements for language, math, and citizenship. That's what the government wants. And the qualification must be feasible in 85% of the nominal study period. So that means we have 50% left for electives. And the electives are an enrichment of the qualification, as distinctive for the school, but also for personal development for the students. This is a schedule from it. You see a lot of qualifications are put together. We call it the profiles you get out for a diploma. The core of the qualifications was made together with the math, with the language, with the social part. And at the end, you have a possibility to choose some electives. Depends on the length of your study and the possibility of the qualification, how much time it takes, and how many electives you can choose. As an example, I took the example of the baker. It's an EQF level 2 qualification. And the core task is prepare bakery products. This is how about 500 qualifications are worked out. Responsible and independence, the role of the entire level professional. You can read it by yourself. Then there is a complexity. The novice professionals work in larger routine in nature. And at least the professional knowledge and skills. They were needed to be a baker. But there's also work processes. There are also work processes. Plans the production of bakery products. Behavior. You make a logical choice. You make a well-considered estimate. You coordinate, plan, etc., etc., etc. And that means the underlying, our competences still exist. So the competence education maybe failed a little bit. But at the end, in the structure, in the qualifications, they were written, the requirements, as were mentioned, the competences still are there. Cooperate and consult, apply professional expertise, planning and organization, deploying materials and resources. That are the underlying competences for the qualification baker. And when you look at the structure, we used the competences by SHL. There were about 25 competences, and I mentioned them in yellow. You can see that 4 of the competences they were in the structure are used by baker at level 2. So every qualification, all of the 500 qualifications, has a description of the process, has a description of the core task, but also has a description of the competences you need for working. Competence-based education has become a commonplace in vocational education. You don't see them as you read the files. You think it's about knowledge, it's about skills, it's about starting workers, but underneath there are still competence used and mentioned. Is the language the qualifications are written in. Finally, the lessons learned involve students and companies in the development process. Don't do it separate. Match starting points to what students can handle, for example, self-direction. Don't accept them to can do it everything at once. Ensure adequate guidance structure in advance for students. Learn from experience. Demand-oriented is tailor-made. Demand-driven approach on the level was organizationally possible. Keep the main direction of the innovation in mind. We are falling back. And competences need subject content. Don't use them as separate words or separate competence or separate skills. No, they need subject. Take your time. Invest in teachers up front, also in the organization. And first create a well thought out educational structure. Then for you, I have a conclusion. Competences have become commonplace. Some people call it skills, some people call it competences. I think, or we think in the Netherlands, it's the same. When introducing the program, it's necessary to realize there are 2 challenges. On the one hand, it's about the what you have to teach. On the other hand, it's about the pedagogical method. That is how we will do it. Keep it apart. Don't let one party decide of the other party how to do or what they should do. Everyone has his own playing field. It's a mistake to accept teachers and organizations to introduce 2 innovations simultaneously. Teach new content and introduce new pedagogical approach are 2 different things, and it takes a lot of time. It's very difficult to combine it at the same time. It takes time to prepare teachers, organizations, students, stakeholders, etc. It's not the educational concept that's imperfect. It's the implementation that makes it imperfect. And from a learning theoretical point of view, a phased implementation is advised with the natural developments towards professionalism of the student and also of the teacher and the school organization. We can learn a lot from Charles Darwin. It's not the strongest of the species that survive, not the most intelligent, but the ones most responsive to change. So we have to keep up with change. We can use competences to make a change for the students, for the workers, for tomorrow. And it's our duty as schools to be prepared and to get well organized so we can help the future students, the future workers to get the best results. Thank you for listening. Are there some questions? Ja.
Binnen 20 minuten hebben we niet heel graag gesproken.
Zeg je niet heel? Ja.
Haast gesproken.
Wat een beetje duidelijk gearticuleerd. Goed genoeg?
Zeker, wel grappig wel Engels.
Ik probeer Engels te praten, niet Amerikaans-Engels.
Uitspraak is zoals een Nederlands. Dat doe ik ook wel. Dat is gewoon wel grappig.
Is je heel Nederlands, ja?
Ja, dat hoor je echt duidelijk. Ja. Nee. Is dat wel? Nee.